Hi, welcome to Priceless Advice, Breauna, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Yay!
Yay! We have some mutual friends in common, not the least of which is Mr. Ben Bisbee, who is a lovely human, and he and I have had conversations about like how wonderful you are, and I've seen your work from LinkedIn and Twitter and
Hmm.
Facebook groups from afar, and again, like other like almost overlapping at some of the same conferences or
Yep.
webinar appearances, and I'm like, I must talk to Brianna on my show. So tell me, and the audience at home, what wonderful work are you doing right now? Because we're talking and right now we're recording in the middle of April, but like what's coming up, hopes and dreams, cool things for people to tune into.
Yeah. Well, I think for me right now, in this day and age, um, for me, my work is, I think, necessary and really important for connecting the cause. Specifically, I look at volunteer programming and volunteer engagement through a lens of racial equity and ensuring that we uproot and identify just harmful practices and behaviors of volunteers, of nonprofits when it comes to serving and giving back, particularly to Black and Brown communities. And so, right now in the United States, with the George Floyd case happening right now, with the killing of Dante Wright, there's just a lot going on, honestly.
Yeah.
And with that, my work is really centered around understanding power and understanding pity and how that plays into the volunteer sector in a harmful way. And so, right now, honestly, my a lot of my work is in my community, the renewed community.
Mhm.
It is a community that I set up, a membership that I set up that really helps individuals who just call themselves, I want to make a change, I want to make a difference, really understand where their harm comes from
Mhm.
and wanting to uproot that in the volunteer and service sector. So, a lot of my work is there, a lot of reflection questions, a lot of figuring out what harm we're doing and how to undo it. And then a lot of conversations around the best practices of volunteer engagement and how that necessarily doesn't feed to the Black and Brown communities that are being served or the Black and Brown volunteers that are a part of their programming. So that's where a lot of my work is right now. And although it's tedious, it can be very hard. It's
Mhm.
also very rewarding when you see light bulbs go off and nonprofits literally are thinking about these things and they're switching a lot of their policies and programming to make sure that everyone's included. So, yeah.
Right. As much as I can, I'll step in to have conversations with other white people to take some of that emotional labor off of my other friends. And
Yeah.
it's really important to, bring in experts. This is your expertise, this is your lane, this is your work, and to
Mm-hmm.
recognize like the deep systemic importance in any organization of recognizing all of this. And I'm really curious what when you see that light bulb go off, like how is that moment for you of the satisfaction of like, aha, they're getting it. Um,
Yeah. No, it feels good because there are times where I'm talking to someone. I'll give you a perfect example.
yeah, please.
Someone from an organization is contacting me and for consulting services, and I go through my spiel and I communicate what I do, and they're engaged and they're listening, and they go, oh, this is all great, but we need you to help us recruit volunteers. Like we need butts and seats.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've said all of this around
The whole setup. Yeah.
who I am. It's right there on the website, like all of these things. And it still centers the bottom line of the numbers, or it still centers the bottom line of, I know that we're going to do good work if we have 50 million volunteers that are coming through our doors. And when I see those instances, I say, okay, you know what? I don't internalize it. I say they're not ready. I just say they're not ready.
Yeah.
And, they're in a specific season right now where they don't get it.
Yeah.
But then when I see other organizations who are literally saying, like, we are actually trying to turn all of our programs and services into a justice lens, through a justice lens, and see it that way. And volunteer programming is equally important in that equation. That's the big aha. And that's when I get excited, because there's a recognition that, as we say, volunteer managers are not the only recruiters. They're not the only people who are engaging. It's an entire organizational understanding that volunteers are essential to the mission. And so when they actually want to take the time to go through, in what ways are we harming? What that means to me is that you're actually out for the community that you're serving, and you see the value and the dignity of that community, and you understand and recognize that I have a place of power because I'm an institution, and I have the mechanisms and the means in order to enact change. And if I do the wrong type of change, it's not helping my mission, and it's not giving us the understanding of what needs to actually be done to help and serve. And so when I see that someone is actually committed, it makes me feel like, there is a future of volunteerism that looks bright and that looks equal for everyone, and who doesn't see these communities from a place of deficit, but a place of dignity that must be held up, and we want to partner in that dignity. And so that's what makes me really excited about it.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of helping people change the language they use, not just in the very obvious ways of like, hey, let's all share each other's pronouns in our emails and things like that, but also that the language, the way you describe your work, yourself, volunteers, team, if there's a separation between staff and volunteers, which shouldn't exist in the first place, that perpetuates stories and can perpetuate that harmful culture, or an unwelcoming culture, or even in extreme circumstances, a very toxic culture. And
yes,
I'm sure you have, I know I have, I know the audience has worked in really, really dysfunctional, toxic, nonprofit, and in my case, government agency cultures. So I'm a big fan of helping people understand that changing language, changing the whole culture of the agency is kind of the best recruitment tool to keep talent, whether it's paid or unpaid or full-time or part-time. And what are some of your first steps in helping people shift that language piece, or that perspective, that even the way we put out recruitment blurbs, has a huge impact on someone feeling welcome or unwelcome for access, equity, justice?
Yeah. I I think for individuals, it does take a lot of time and energy to first even say, there is a problem. Like being able to, that first recognition, there is a problem here, or there may be a possibility that I'm missing something, and I need to find out what that missing link is, right? And so that understanding and that recognition that we may be missing someone's story. So who are we not hearing? What are we not listening to? And the understanding of, just because you do good stuff doesn't make that outcome good, right? Just because you have these, like we say, good intentions, it doesn't mean that it always translates. It actually can sometimes mean that it perpetuates harm. And so the first thing that I communicate is, just an overall understanding of how you see those that you serve. There is an automatic power that is ever present when you tell a volunteer, you are coming in to help this person. Right off the bat, there is a feeling of, I have something they do not have.
Mm-hmm.
So I am at an advantage because I am offering something that they lack.
Mm-hmm.
That moment is the moment where there is a unequal balance of power, and that conversation needs to be able to change, to be able to recognize, you are a person that is helping, but you are also a person that is in need of help.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing can be embodied and present at the same time. And so just in this moment, you may have something that they are in need of specifically, but at the same time, what assets, what skills, what gifts and talents do they have that you don't have, that work in an ecosystem together to create change? And so there's first that realization of, hey, this entity of volunteers has power. Let's talk about it. Let's communicate about it. Let's unwrap it. Let's see the ways in which you've bolstered them up to be the superheroes and always deflected to the community as being always the people that are in need of their services. And so a lot of it is that reflection piece of looking back at that. And once we start having those conversations about the mindset change within that, there has to be a look at the way we communicate need, the way that we set up volunteer opportunities, the way that we do trainings and orientations through this justice lens. And so it's no longer I'm doing this for you, but we are all in co-liberation together, and we are all working towards one thing. And I think a lot of times in volunteerism or just service in general, there is a lot of, I think there's a big lens on this person has this problem and they have a need that needs to be fixed, versus what institutions and systems and conditions and environment led to this scenario to where we even have to have volunteers in the first place. Mm-hmm. That is where we can start digging into the why, so that it's no longer this is this person's fault that I need to fix them, but it's now I'm working towards liberation for all of us, because all of us are tied together in humanity. And so I think those are some very first steps to be able to understand and recognize to keep moving forward, for sure.
Absolutely. I've always seen that natural world ecosystem, we're all interdependent. So I've always, my lens for solving for issues or addressing questions, or people can be so, they can have such blinders on. It can be so myopic, where they're like, I want to solve, like you said at the beginning, the problem of recruitment and retention. And it's like, whoa, let's pull that lens. Let's get that wide shot. Because why are people turning up and leaving? Why are they not turning up in the first place? And how is your mission truly impacting the community? Are you, again, does your work often focus on not just, it sounds like, and from what I know, so please expand on this idea of, getting called to, like, we're working on recruitment, and you're like, the whole culture, the whole viewpoint needs to be shifted.
Right. And that's so, that's such a real part of, first, if you look at, say anything, let's do orientation.
Yeah.
Okay. We have an orientation. That is the one time. Right now, there are probably millions of orientations going around the world right now, right? And volunteer managers or coordinators or engagers, whoever, have the amazing power in this moment that these group of people are listening to me. And what I have to say, I have two options. I can tell them the truth, or I can perpetuate this do good, feel good, let's go out and have a good time mentality without really being able to talk about the real issues. And I see this, let's recruit, how do we retain, how do we create a good strategy, these are fine and good, but what foundation are they built on? Like
Yeah.
there is a foundation that's built on, let's make sure the annual report looks good. There's a, built on, let's make sure that this donor is satisfied with this thing. Oh, we only had 800 volunteers last year, let's hurry up and try to get to 10,000. It's like these very transactional things. And nonprofits were never meant to be transactional. They were always meant to have a hand in transformation and of, at the end of the day, yes, we can fill gaps, and there's nothing wrong with filling gaps. But while you're filling gaps, talk about why the gaps have to be filled in the first place.
Mhm.
And yes, we are that helping hand, but also I want to see the sector, specifically volunteer programming, a place for communal support.
Right.
So I want to be able to walk into a waiting room at a nonprofit organization and not be able to tell the difference between those who are being served and those who are volunteering. It's
Right.
all just bound up, mushed together ecosystem of people. And I think that's a real issue of not getting to the root of things. You call me because you want to engage more Black volunteers, but these Black volunteers are not going to be a part of your organization when you're out here not listening to the community and
Mhm.
you're doing focus groups, and you want to extract information from them, but you don't want to pull them in the process of actually creating the change. Like there's a real extraction that continues to go on, in this space. And it's interesting. I was talking to someone from both, spaces. You have the volunteer program right here. You have advancement and development and marketing communications who are constantly trying to extract stories and feel good stuff from the volunteers, right? And so they're talking with volunteer engagers around what's a good story. We need a good story. We need something that is going to put in the annual report. We need something to highlight. But on the other side, you have the volunteers themselves who are a part of this system that is creating harm when they go out to communities and they leave it worse off than
Mhm.
what it was.
Mhm.
You have, volunteer managers who are oftentimes either feel like they don't have enough power or they just feel like that's not my lane because I'm over here doing this thing and I have some dedicated volunteers and I don't want to rock the boat.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, when I think about this work and I think about what I do through connecting the cause, I'm not concerned and I tell people this, I'm not concerned with your good intentions. I'm
Yeah.
not concerned with, the donor that's been there for 50 years that you want to continue staying and you don't want to rock the boat. What's more important, not rocking the boat or being a part of justice? Like there is just,
Yeah.
which one you want to do. And then once you grapple with that in your head, then we can move forward on what it looks like to make change.
Exactly. And it is transformational, and more that's been the emerging model in the last 5, 10 years in the sector. Thank goodness that
Yeah.
away from pure hours, numbers, what's the value
Yeah.
of their work per
Yep.
year? We are
Yep.
robots and automatons. And that has been filtered through the most privileged and, like you said, pity, like a condescending, colonialist attitude
Yep.
where and the extraction economy, right? That's
Yep.
that's the model around the world.
Yep.
That's European Western culture around the
Mm-hmm.
world. What can we
Yep.
get out of it? And then
Yep.
and the the breaking down of the social safety net. It's never been super strong in America anyway. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
but again, particularly in 2020, where we saw an an infrastructure and a social safety net completely unprepared to handle the challenge of a pandemic,
Yeah.
Job loss, economic slowdown, and especially in our sector, I people ask me, oh, for consulting, and maybe this is true of you as well. It's like, oh, did 2020 slow down? It's like I've had more work than ever because suddenly this opened up
Yep.
every executive director's eyes to, oh crap, we weren't on a stable foundation.
Yeah.
This hasn't been working, and this is the time to change. Have you seen that in your witnessed that in your work this last year?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You know, it's so interesting because on one side, like, yeah, I'm so glad that this wave is happening, but there has to be a recognition of what harm have I done before
Hmm.
leading up to this point where
Yeah.
then I need to make a change. And honestly, I think the transparency in that is so critical to be able to bring on advocates for nonprofit organizations and for volunteer programs.
Yeah.
Because if you are able to openly communicate, these are the ways that we created harm,
Hmm.
these are the ways that these are the things in the programs and the volunteer opportunities that we are um, doing away with. This is
Hmm.
why we're doing away with them, and this is why we're moving forward. The people that are going to stick with you, man, aren't they some gems,
Yeah.
right? To be
Yeah.
yes, like, you know what, I see the transparency, I see the openness, I see the willingness to communicate, I see the willingness for transformation. And so I've seen this definite uptick in, we want to create, as we want to get out of these boxes and we want to really move towards, what this looks like to really create sustainable change, in this way. And so I'm really excited about the fact that people are thinking about it. And also, as a Black woman, I am trying to hold to see if it continues. To see if is it, are you going to do the long-term work of it being baked in
Right.
to your organization, that no matter who comes in and out the doors, the
Hmm.
culture of what you've now created around justice still holds true, and it's still a standard regardless of what happens for the rest of our days. So that's something that I'm equally hoping, that it is not a, we put out a statement and Black Lives Matter and, equality for all, but then it's not being able to be sustained in their organization.
Yeah, and or people get yes and to all of that, and that kind of hashtag activism, and hashtags can be extremely powerful, and of course, so social media can be extremely powerful
Right?
in being transparent and showing things as they are happening in real time
Yes.
and not getting propagandized or filtered out later by whatever sources. And there's whenever I do listening sessions and conversations and focus groups beginning with an organization to kind of, take the temperature. How does everyone feel about the volunteer experience? How can it be, more accessible, and how can we remove barriers and
Mm-hmm.
feel more welcoming? I always hit, I almost always hit, no matter how great the organization has been trying to improve, like that there's distrust because they haven't walked the walk when they've talked the talk before,
Yeah.
time and time again, and or just poor communication throughout the organization that these changes are real and permanent, and
Yep.
everyone's in this kind of pattern of, the boy who cried wolf syndrome, where like, oh, you keep saying, or let's have more meetings to talk about it. It's like, no, we actually have to take action.
Yep.
This is how the change occurs. This is what it looks like. This is the timeline. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big proponent that every interaction with any volunteer is an invitation to stay or an invitation to go.
Mm.
And for some people, it's fine if they go. That's okay. If the
Yeah.
culture is shifting in a positive way
Yes.
and someone who can't get on board with that is left behind, rather than
Yes.
grasp whether they've been there for months or decades,
Yep.
whether or not they're a donor, it's like I don't want someone who can't get with the program and can't adapt and evolve in a
Yeah.
positive direction for the agency and the world, like that they're going to go do something else. And that's the nature of volunteering and community engagement, is people's their priorities are going to shift for their own personal why, their own personal reasons. And if the agency is evolving in a way where their why doesn't resonate anymore,
Yep.
that's okay.
That's
don't
okay.
don't try to grab their little scruff of their shirts
And
and pull them back
that's
in.
right.
Like,
And that's the problem, I think, so much when we think about retention.
yeah.
And I mean, just thinking about the basis of the why, even around, retention, I think about number one, of course, we navigate around the scarcity mindset of
Yeah.
we have to have all the volunteers everywhere in the world right now at our organization here and now. And if we lose one, we are failing. Or if we lose one, our numbers are going to, be wonky or look bad, or we're going to lose these people. And once again, there is that shift of what does it look like to not worry about who you're retaining, as far as let's try to move and tweak every little thing
Hmm.
so that we can retain Joe and Bob and Bill and Susan and like all of these people. What we've done is we've aided to mission drift,
Hmm.
where we've moved from being community centric and community focused to volunteer focused. And this is something that people look at me and they like clutch their pearls like, oh Lord.
Oh, the vapors, Virginia, the vapors.
But no,
Yeah.
volunteer programming is in in my work is not meant to be volunteer centric.
Right.
It's not. Volunteer programming is meant to partner along with communities, that the volunteer programs decisions and processes and systems are created around the community itself that they are serving. And
Hmm.
so they are the helping hands to what's already happening in community, and they are partnering with that. We have, I feel, gone so off scale to in, even in the ways we do volunteer appreciation,
Hmm.
in the ways that we do volunteer applications, in all of those ways, what we've done is how can I keep the volunteer happy, not how can I keep the program effective. And
Right.
the effectiveness is how much closely in alignment can I get with community skills and needs and assets and success. What are the dreams of the community, and how can the volunteers support those dreams so we can all be co-dreaming together around building each other up? That is what the center needs to be about, and not keeping the volunteer happy. Because what ends up happening with volunteer happiness is just like our happiness, it changes,
Hmm.
it fades away. One day they're going to want this, the next day they're going to want this. And if we base volunteerism on how good it made us feel and how happy it made us feel when the justice work starts, and it's hard and it is tiring, and they start seeing all these systemic issues, they're going to be like, this isn't fun,
Yeah.
so I'm going to tap out.
Yeah.
And that's not what volunteerism is. And I feel like organizations are setting up volunteers for their detriment
Hmm.
if they're not like, you know what, this is the hard work and we
Yeah.
want you to be in with us on the hard work. Will you have fun and give high fives? Come on, yes, because your
Yeah.
job well, but that shouldn't be the main focus of why you're there in the first place.
Exactly, and it's so much of a bait and switch in recruitment. And you know what? I have some improv training. I like a punchy headline. I like a
Yeah,
cute
we
little
all do.
hashtag and phrase. We all like that stuff. And I've got a pretty popular program that I learned through hard lessons over the years, and of comfort, convenience, connection. And it's really about, like, I use the word happy volunteers or happy people, but it's really about that comfort, convenience, and connection, and that is under the umbrella of the whole community. So it's really
Mhm.
community engagement. It's like, oh, volunteer engagement. Okay, that's the hashtag you need to understand the work and that it'll fit with your agency.
Right.
But really, it's community engagement and that relationship, that someone who is connected to your organization and your work, they could be a fan on social media, they could be a board member, they could be a volunteer, they can be a donor, they can be a
Hmm.
client, they can be any of those things all at the same time. They can shift between anyone, like a fan, like a
Yep.
kind of fan design, and that's that holistic and transformational approach to, like, we're in relationship with each other and to the work for 5 minutes. If it's a remote micro opportunity like Be My Eyes app, where like I'm helping
Yep.
a visually impaired stranger around the world for 5 minutes, I feel great, great. I might be sad that day and that picks me up, but I think this constant kind of like Mary Poppins sugarcoating stuff that happens is so unhelpful. And it's maladaptive. It doesn't create real change.
Yeah. We've made, I feel like I feel like volunteer program, like when I say I feel like volunteer programs, of course, there's some doing amazing things in
Right.
this space. So I don't want to, put it all in a generalized way, but just for the sake of conversation, I think that we have definitely, and I put a post up about this on Instagram, like we've
Hmm.
literally made volunteering Disney World. Like that's
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
made, a Disney World where you come and you feel good. You get the Mickey Mouse ears, you
Hmm.
get the T-shirt, you get the mug, and
Photo op.
you get the photo op, and you're like, peace out. That was a good time. And we've created these spaces. How can they have, the most fun or the most, energetic time? And I feel like we've taken these really hard issues of healthcare inequalities and just disparities all around, and people experiencing homelessness, we've done we've literally taken these big issues that need real work, and we've put them in like this pint size like box that has a bow on it and been like, this is your deed for the day, like
Hmm.
we've done this, to these spaces. And these these issues require heartfelt thought, right? It requires an understanding. And that's why I truly feel like every single volunteer program around the world should be engaging in deep reflection,
Yeah.
either before or during or after the volunteer experience, and be able to educate and communicate the real issues that are going on within the communities they're serving. If you serve refugee communities, have you communicated to your volunteers, this is how the pandemic has impacted them in these different ways?
Hmm.
Have you communicated that to your volunteers? If there are people experiencing homelessness, that's your community that you're partnering with. Have you communicated with the volunteers? This is the way systemic racism has hurt our communities. Keeping them engaged and in the loop so that they can have dinner table conversations about the true things that are happening. My big thing is, I don't care if they never come through your doors ever again, but during that orientation or during that website search, like you were saying, that
Hmm.
they, have these different points of contact, wherever they are, whatever hat or role they carry for that 5 minutes or for that 25 years, were you able to effectively express something that they can take back to their friends, their family, and they're washing clothes, at the laundromat, or they are at a spades game, I don't know, and someone says, God, homeless people are so lazy. Can you effectively communicate, wait, well, I actually went to a volunteer orientation and these are the things that I know to be true now. This is where the advocacy is. The advocacy is not necessarily right there, right then during the volunteer orientation. It's what can I take after that I can have these conversations to really be able to make change in the people that I'm in proximity with on a daily basis.
And yes, and again, to all of that, I'll just be like, I agree with everything you say. This is why I wanted to talk for so long. Um, and a part of conservation education is called, doceting interpretation, educational interpretation. And that is a skill set that I think any and every person
Mm,
having anything to do with volunteering, volunteer engagement, volunteer management, volunteer service, because that is a way of talking about subjects that creates an emotion, a genuine emotional connection, and gets people thinking, and in highly effective ways creates positive behavioral change.
mm-hmm.
And there's steps to that. And again, it comes down to the use of language, recognizing the why of the people that you're talking to, and
Yeah.
not talking with people, having conversations, having open-ended questions, even for uncomfortable subjects,
Yeah.
and allowing that transformational listening and hearing and impact to occur. I mean, the reality is that volunteers, people who are donating their time and talent, you can find someone to do anything. If
Yeah.
their why, if you've described it correctly and honestly, that's like you're chopping onions for 4 hours. You know,
Yeah.
you're passing out, hygiene kits under the bridge to
Yeah.
homeless camps in LA, and you're going to see some stuff and you're going to hear some stuff, but this is the world, and this is how this
Yeah.
is. And some someone who's running the program is part of the community, a client that's
Yep.
gotten out of the situation and is coming back to help others come out of it.
Yes. That I think that's such a major point that we tend to miss. And I understand, and I've been a part of organizations too where clients can't become volunteers until after a certain number of months or after a year or whatever the case may be. And I have my thoughts about that. We won't go down to that rabbit
So
hole.
arbitrary, yeah. Arbitrary
But
barrier, yeah.
but I think that as volunteer engagers, it's a necessity to think, who am I partnering with in the community
Hmm.
that can take my spot? Like,
Yeah.
who am I building up that can come and contract and actually do volunteer orientations,
Hmm.
who can come and train volunteers that, from the community, someone from the community, someone who has when I say community, a lived experience of what they're
Exactly.
about to enter into,
Yep.
who can come on board and do that. Because it's always, I never forget, I used to work in refugee resettlement, and it
Hmm.
was always one thing for me and a volunteer who was maybe white to come and, greet a family from the airport and say welcome. It's a whole other thing when somebody from the community they were in to come to the airport with me and say welcome in their own language. Like
Hmm.
that's a mindset shift
Right.
completely. And that's something that I think is so important, of building up leaders who don't look. And that's the thing. Volunteer engagement is you're a psychologist and a mama and like all these different things, that there's no like hat of like, this is what a volunteer engager should look like. And we need to make sure that we create those spaces for anyone who is in community activism,
Hmm.
anybody wanting to create change, they are able to be a part of that. And the thing about it, once again, going a layer back, do you have relationships in the community that actually they trust you to say, I want to be a part of your organization because this organization is transparent and has not perpetuated harm? So there is, even making sure that those conversations are had. um, Speaking of transformative volunteering, I do follow Jack Mesereau's
Hmm.
theory in the transformational learning, and I've literally just adapted it for volunteerism.
Yeah.
And with that, In order to create transformational change, there has to be this disorienting dilemma. And this dilemma where I come in and something completely shifts, whether it's birth, giving birth, whether it is saying that you've been diagnosed with cancer, something that just turns your world, upside down.
Yeah.
And what I want, what my goal is for volunteer engagers and organizations to see volunteerism as a disruptive, disorienting dilemma, where they come in and they think one thing about the community they're serving. They think one thing about what's happening. And because of the interaction and because of the new knowledge that they've received, they can take a step back and be like, whoa, I had no idea. What do I need to change in my lifestyle, in my thinking, in my mentality, in my emotions to be able to now align myself with this new truth? And that is the goal, I feel, that all organizations need to adopt. Will they have a transformational, disrupting, disorienting dilemma when they think one thing about the homeless population or one thing about these young Black kids, and then they learn of all the things that go into it, and then they're walking out completely not changed, but on a journey of wanting to learn more and wanting to just deconstruct and unlearn what they had before. That's the goal for sure.
Yeah, and it's breaking down those assumptions and getting the real picture that ultimately builds up that sense of trust and togetherness.
Yes,
We're working towards a common goal in an
absolutely.
agency and in a community. And if that, and I've also seen agencies realize, like, we don't need to, or foundations too, we don't need to exist anymore. Either the problem is solved, or we've recognized that we are not the ones to solve the problem. So we're going to
Yeah.
shift our assets or what we know of this work to, a different entity that's better set up to do the work in a real way, and
Mm-hmm.
not a lip service kind of a way. In our final few minutes, what would be your pie in the sky hope dream?
Woo.
Nothing is, everything is unlimited. We can all instantly manifest the highest good. Like, what's your pie in the sky for the sector in the next, months or years?
Yeah. Whew, I'm trying to be as succinct as possible.
Let it go. Let whatever you want to
So,
say.
my dream, number one, is that you go up to somebody and you're meeting them for the first time and you ask their name, the regulars, where they're from, whatever. And then within those same questions, they ask, what cause are you connected to?
Hmm.
And every single person on the planet has a cause that they are connected to, that they are deeply tied to, that is a part of their identity, that is a part of their purpose of why they exist. And that question is just as important, if not more important, than I work here or I live here or I do this thing. And so that's my pie in the sky on an individual basis. My pie in the sky, I think, for nonprofit organizations is that they connect, they dissolve and connect with community organizations, grassroots organizations that are already doing the work. And volunteer programs are like, here is a force of volunteers that I am placing in your hands to do the work of the community. You have them, and that's it. Like, that is the goal. They are a facilitator of resources and not a hoarder of resources. And so that they are able to cast out different, volunteers to be able to serve and just be hands. And that Black and Brown communities have the autonomy and the resources to do whatever they want to do for the solutions of their own communities. Like, that is the goal. And that there's no formal volunteer, but I am a helper and in need of help. you are a helper and in need of help. And we are working together to make sure that we're all taken care of in a collective way, and that we care about each other enough to see that worth and that dignity. And you have skills and you have talents, and we're all bringing them together so that there's not a hierarchy of power, but there is this completely broken down barriers of just this transformational movement that happens between nonprofit organizations, and that the money will go where the community is, and that they have autonomy to decide whatever they want to do with it. And if there are people who are wanting to help and wanting to serve, then they ask the community themselves, what does it look like for me to be a part of this? And then ultimately, they themselves are the community, and we all are doing it together. So that's my pie in the sky of just barriers and boundaries are broken, and local agency is at the center, and all justice work is, we're looking through the justice lens. And people don't use volunteerism as a form of feeling good about themselves, but they use it as a tool for being able to really make change. So that's I guess as succinct as I can be as far as the
So
future of.
say we all. Yeah, it was so say we all. I plant the seed and I speak it into existence.
Yeah,
That's how it is, and align our work in that direction. It's
yeah.
good stuff. I'm so delighted we found the time to do
Yay!
this, and we could talk all day.
Yes.
But there's work to do. There's other stuff
Yeah.
going on. So thank you so much,
Of
Brianna, for
course.
sharing your priceless advice and Tuesday tips, and just wonderful to get to know you better and really
Yeah.
talk in person, virtually
Yes.
in
Yes.
person, and in the post pandemic times, I hope we can overlap in real life and really sit down and have
Yeah.
wonderful conversation and beverages and
Love
hugs and
it.
all that
I'm
good stuff.
down. I'm down.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening.